Hello, hi everyone. This is a review of this Redditor, huhwonyoung. So thank you for sending me this particular paper. It allows me to actually see some very good points. And of course, there's also going to be some issues which I'll be highlighting it to you. So whomever is going to follow this itself, right? Again, I will start everyone by letting everyone know more about the syllabus document. So if you would have followed some of the videos that I've sent thus far itself, I tend to recommend my students to take a look at the syllabus document to understand the grading system. So, for example, K is the demonstration of knowledge, and from that itself, if we can interpret the academic information, particularly for a case study, or the textual information in the preamble for an essay, then that is when you make valid inferences and you apply relevant concepts onto contemporary issue, you'll be scoring a C. Sometimes we give a C plus, or it is because we think the application was done very well. However, if you just give me the application but you skip out the analysis, for example, some coherent academic arguments, then in that case, you will not be able to move into an A. So there's some analysis needed. So later when I'm grading this person's work, right, you all of you get a chance to see why I can be very assured that I'll be giving this person an A. Not the A grade, but A for the analysis is because it's very clear when we go back to the syllabus document. Another good thing about this particular Redditor's work is the fact that I managed to identify all elements of evaluation. So whomever is trying to learn more about evaluation, I think this is the video that you may want to take note of it. So later when I post it up onto Reddit, I think I will be making a special mention that for those learning evaluation, this is a good video for you to take a look at. Reason. So before I continue for evaluation, I need to see three elements. One, you must be able to evaluate critically some of the contemporary issues. Two, you must be able to recognize uncertain assumptions and evaluate their relevance. Finally, you're able to synthesize academic arguments. So in the final essay that I'm going to review, for this candidate's work, all of you will get a chance to finally understand why this person almost have the full 5 marks for an essay, right? And it's just that it was a pity. And probably for huhwonyoung, I hope that after this particular review itself, you finally get a chance to understand how to score even higher for every evaluation that you're going to face. Okay, nevertheless, I'm going to start. Um, Now, to begin with itself, for question one, similarly, if you notice that you interpreted or rather, if you write down the equation wrongly itself, it shows concept not that the K is not missing. So in this case, you'll be marked down. So this is quite common. Sometimes it's just like a careless mistake made by some students. But for question B, this is a very good question. This is talking about in the answer, in fact. This is talking about what are the demand factors, etc., that cause a change in price. Now, when I talk about apply relevant concepts to the contemporary issue and moving towards an analysis, so when a candidate is able to give me a very clear diagram, including the part circled in purple, this means the candidate is really applying onto the context and trying to show analysis. So some of you, when you draw diagram in a very whimsical manner, like a lexical approach, like yeah, just 青菜 lah, whatever. Okay, so if you approach in this particular manner, right, then of course Cambridge will also give you 青菜 marks law. So 青菜 starts with a C, right? So in this case, if you want to score A, be analytical, don't be 青菜. So for the non Chinese students, I apologize. Xinjiang means very lackadaisical, like just very random, not very serious, a little bit flippant, right? So that's what I was trying to point out. But this is very good analysis, and if I continue itself, let me explain to everyone why this is a very strong analysis for a low order question. First, the candidate applied the concepts onto contemporary issue because by looking at the extract, the candidate has interpreted the extract, and the candidate even give me things like a rightward shift of the demand curve from D0 to D1, and even give me the price adjustment process. And some of you thought, hey, you mean this is very good analysis? And the answer is on a low weightage question. If I bring everyone to the syllabus document, candidate has quite a lot of things. For example, the candidate talk about how there's a change in non-price determinant, talk about how it has affected the price and quantity over here, and even give me the price mechanism, the price adjustment process. So of course, this is strong analysis for a low order question. So sometimes some of you are wondering, how do I score my score when it comes to analysis? This is one way to do so. Now, it was also good that the candidate tried to apply PES. Okay, but for a low order question, if you just apply in this particular format, because I cannot give you a lot of marks, the maximum mark for application of PES on a low order question is between 1 to 2. So in this case, you have fulfilled almost everything that I would love to see. However, I actually wrote it down on this script. If you're aiming for an analysis for including of this elasticity concept, PD and PES, and you are trying to handle a higher order question like 6 mark, 8 marks, or 10 mark question, then in that case itself, I would expect that you also apply the analysis in a very rigorous manner. For example, if the supply of the good is priced inelastic, every increase in price will lead to a less than proportionate increase in quantity supply, leading to a steep supply curve S1. I will need that. Reason? This explanation, the part in blue below, is meant for this part in C, how a change in price itself cause a movement along the supply curve, right? Less than proportionally and more than proportionally causing a different gradient in your supply curve. So if any one of you are trying to apply elasticity concept, this is the way to go. All right. And for huhwonyoung, it's just a bit more. Okay, but for this format question, don't need. You can stick to whatever you've been doing. But if you're going to do a demand and supply question, like what you have chosen for your essay, I would suggest that you may want to incorporate this skill. Right, it's just a bit more for you to skill up when it comes to your analysis. I continue with question C. Question C just asking about the opportunity cost. But a reminder, I don't see definition there. I tend to have mentioned K to a C to an A. So while this is a low order question, I would have given you the 2 marks for sure. But if this is a 3 mark question or 4 mark question without the K, I'll be a bit disturbed because it seems to me that you have a lot of application, but there's no a demonstration of knowledge, right? So do take note, it's a scale up thing. It's not like I can just score one element and I can just skip the other element. It doesn't work that way, right? You need all three. It's like a building block. You need the base before you can go up to build on higher levels. So continue with question D. For question D itself, right, let me erase this. So for question D, what happened was, so for some of the students, this question is talking about what are the characteristics of price discrimination, the different characteristic. So for the characteristic itself, I would have hoped that you may want to tell me the 3 characteristics to begin with before applying them, right? But again, low order question, right? So as long as you apply rigorously, I will be able to give you all the full marks. But again, if this is a 5 mark question, I would have expected that you may want to talk about what are the conditions for price discrimination, or you can give me the definition of price discrimination, right? Do take note of that. Moving on to question E. Now for question E, you can see why your teacher put a huh over here. Even I, when I was reading this, I also put a huh over here. Now, in future, whenever you see this kind of question, discuss the factor, there's often an agent involved. You have to consider, is the agent a firm or a consumer or a producer? This question was about a firm because it talks about this service provider. So in this case, it is a firm. I would have expected some marginalist principle, right? I bring everyone back to decision making of economic agents, marginalist principle. I need MRMC approach for firms. If I don't see that equation at the start, I will be a little bit disturbed. A little bit. So you give me a lot of other points like K more than TFC. Are you confused with shutdown condition? Like TR less than TVC, you mean? So if that is the case, so you can see your teacher was trying to circle a lot of things, right? So in this case, we would have I interpreted it as the concept needed itself was not demonstrated at the start. So even though you're trying to give me some of the benefits now and some of the costs, I cannot give you a very high score because the reason is because I should be focusing on marginal revenue and marginal cost. And then you link to the context to how it costs marginal revenue to increase or it has a high marginal revenue and how it leads to marginal cost to increase or maybe not so high. And finally, in your discussion or in your evaluation, you then talk about why this equation MR equals to MC, why you are unable to maximize exactly at QP or the desired outcome. It could be due to constraint. It could be due to the need to gather more information. And those are further evaluation points when we talk about challenging assumptions, why you just cannot make the best decision, right? So in this case, when I see that you did not give me other considerations when it comes to rational decision making. So now you can see in this case, it's very difficult for me to award you the marks accordingly. Okay. Moving on to the very last question, question F. The question is talking about interventions in the healthcare market, right? So when it comes to intervention in the healthcare market, I tend to get my students to, they may want to consider what is the end objective of the government first, which is efficiency and equity. Before they discuss all the different policies, like what is joint provision, etc., there's a misconception of joint provision or subsidies. It's always on the producer first, unless it is onto if it's onto consumer, we tend to use the term grants. Right? So be very mindful of what curve shift. I think it could be because when you're handling this question, you could be having a little bit of exam anxiety, right? So maybe that actually costs you quite a lot of marks. And if your analysis for that particular subsidy, right, you interpreted the information wrongly, so you can see the entire C itself will be marked down, right? So this is something, maybe this explains why in this particular answer, you might have thought that you wrote at length, right? But length of the argument is not equal to the application, neither is it equal to the analysis. Okay, so it was a pity because when I was looking at some of your points, it was quite good. Okay, but I can explain, let me explain to you why I put it down over here. Good try. Okay, and the reason is because it was a good effort at evaluation. It was unfortunate that the analysis at the start itself was not done well. So it affected the evaluation a little bit because you are unable to synthesize a good judgment. However, there were some elements of evaluation in this particular answer. For example, notice that the candidate gave me a few key things. For example, the candidate talked about things like when it comes to the various policies, it was trying to consider the context over here. I'm not so sure if everyone get the chance to see this. The candidate was trying to consider the context, and the teacher was even trying to help you further by letting it to become a bit more pronounced, right? You can actually highlight even that it is clearly onto the Indonesian market. Now, if you can consider the context, right? Again, I bring everyone back to the evaluation function. Notice the candidate is doing this very good skill. Evaluate critically contemporary issue. It was found in the conclusion. This is a form of good evaluation, right? So in future, if anyone is trying to attempt evaluation, you must give me one thing first, which is evaluate critically the contemporary issue. Of course, you must understand the context well. If you don't know the context, then it will be quite difficult. That is why do understand Cambridge attempt at why they will give additional marks for students who are quite aware of the current context, right? Because they can really evaluate critically contemporary issue. It is like a skill that they have. And Cambridge do give students marks for that. Okay, so I think it is a fair assessment by Cambridge. So a reminder to everyone, you may want to demonstrate this skill, exhibit this skill in your answer. I continue with the second case study. Second case study itself, I don't see much of a problem. Again, when I talk about comparative advantage, I don't see the definition. It seems like there's a persistent problem. You don't like definition, is it? Is it because we all don't like to define what we want in our lives? No, I'm kidding. So that aside. But you see, if you don't have the definition, right, you can see you got marked down. So K moving to a C, moving to an A. A reminder on that. For the rest, I don't see any big issues. I move very quickly onto the tariff. Now, back to this question that is about tariff. So I think for those who do not have the question, let me read out the question for all of you. So it talks about in view of the problem of food insecurity, we discuss whether tariff reduction is an effective measure in helping the Philippines achieve inclusive growth. So for this, I need to talk to me about like what exactly it's like inclusive growth because that's the end objective of the question. Secondly, you move into the question too quickly. You give me tariff immediately. You didn't even define the end objective. What are the issues you face with food insecurity, right? And so if you can define what are the in view of the insecurity problem, and you can set the condition like, so this means we will want to achieve this, we want to achieve that, for example. and we also want to achieve inclusive growth. If you can set that context, I can assure you, you will have scored a lot more for the C moving to an A analysis. But what happened was you moved immediately to tariff. Maybe when you saw the word tariff, you got triggered to spam a content. Most of my students are like that, right? When they see tariff, right, they were told that, oh, you must give me tariff diagram. And so all of them started drawing tariff diagram without having a consideration of the question. Also, I when assessing this, I have to say, Howon Young, I think your writing speed is very decent. So I do think you can afford that time to really look at the context and set the context right before you discuss. Because there are some of the things that you mentioned, right, is actually not doing you good. Right, it seems like you're a bit regurgitating. But if you set the condition right, I think you can really discuss it in a very analytical manner because I don't see much of a problem for your analysis. So this is something that you may want to take note of. And if you do not explain it properly, the context, so you give me the tariff, and then you talk about how it causes some price and all this, but I don't see how is it linked to inclusive growth, right? Does it help to close the income gap or something, or does it help to have a fairer distribution of goods and services? So again, that was missing. And when I was looking at your tariff diagram has a lot of things missing. The demand and supply for sure, lah, huh? All these are quite necessary when you talk about the tariff diagram. So again, just now I was praising you, right? For the diagram. If you drew a diagram well, it's showing coherent economic arguments. If you draw a diagram not so well, then obviously you'll be marked down. So when you're looking at this, you were wondering how come my level marking got so low? Again, inclusive growth not very well defined. In view of the problem, not very well contextualized, and even when it comes to the analysis component, not well analyzed. So obviously your level marking will be marked down a little bit. But again, I must remind everyone, this is again a classic case of why I can give this candidate a very good evaluation score. I've already mentioned if you are able to evaluate critically the contemporary issue, I will be able to give you the score. Second, if you're also able to synthesize economic arguments, I will also be able to give you evaluation score. So this person talk about an appropriate measure to benefit citizens in the short run. It can potentially result in further food insecurity while giving as less rice farmers find this profitable. And so in this case, it talks about how in this country's context itself should consider things like this. Notice the candidate is literally examining the contemporary issue, right? Evaluating critically. And at the same time, the candidate is trying to argue and trying to synthesize into a judgment. So the marker is very fair over here because I cannot award you for the level marking because your analysis was a little bit lacking. But I do give you the marks for the evaluation, right? Because again, I bring everyone back to the syllabus document. The candidate did fulfill quite a number of the bullet points as stated out in the evaluation. Okay. So again, for those who are trying to work with evaluation, this is some idea for those that are trying to improve onto the evaluation skill. Now for question F, the question is with reference to the data provided, we're supposed to discuss the appropriateness of this policy undertaken by the Singapore government to address the challenges in the face of the Russian-Ukraine war. So of course, if you have heard me earlier on, I would have hope that my students will have defined the condition, what are the challenges, for example. So it was trying to talk about some issues over here, right? But I do not see it being linked to the context, right? Like which extract are you talking about? So even though you mentioned extract 6, right? It says it leads to significant problem, one being the increased risk perception, but dampen confidence. What the problems I'm looking at is macro problems, right? You're supposed to interpret the information, right? Don't just give me the raw information. We're supposed to interpret them. So what do you think this will bring me? The likelihood of inflation? Are you trying to say that? Or are you trying to say that there's a likelihood of recession due to the dampened confidence? Right. So you may want to set that right. Where if you can set that right itself, subsequently your discussion right is very clear cut. Right. So again, when I was looking at the rest itself, I think it was good. I see you using a diagram. Okay, so it's just that real national income a reminder. And by the way, all these are if you use ADAS or it should be Y1, Y2 or Y0 or yeah, please don't give me Q. I if your teacher has shown you examiners report from 2019, Cambridge has spelled out that they don't want to see this. It was mentioned in 2019 examiners report. So So, and they felt that this is actually poor analysis. And when they were expecting Y1, Y2, right, they literally spelled out from Y0 to Y1, right, rather than Q0 to Q1. And they say that a surprisingly um, significant minority, right? So this is what was spelled out. So if you have access to the 2019 SMS report, or if you beg your teacher for it, then of course you can clearly understand what I'm talking about. But of course, I cannot review it to all of you because SMS report restricted material. So I can only see it. I cannot show it to the students. But your teachers is able to show it to you, right? Show it, but cannot let you take picture, cannot let you disseminate, etc. I'm going to continue with the rest. So continue with the rest itself, the analysis was somewhat decent. I can see you talk about shift in ADAS. You even give me a little bit of the K process. I like that. So that is fantastic. So if I see students give me K process multiplier well explained, that is very good. So if you have seen the video I shared with everyone yesterday, also the K process itself must be explained well. If you can explain it very well itself, you will be given the additional analysis score. Then when it talks about the rest of the policy itself, I was looking at it, but again, rest of the policy, I didn't see you shifting ADES as much. So again, analysis, you set yourself up. You wrote very good application skills, but you didn't apply to the diagram. So what do you want me to do, right? So in this case, you can understand why level marking you got marked down a little bit. But again, I bring everyone to why I can give this candidate good evaluation score. The candidate mentioned this as a synthesized judgment. Ultimately, and the candidate critically evaluate the context by talking about Singapore's closest trading partners, which includes China, USA, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc. And they would have this particular approach, but in the long run, they can do this, but it is definitely assumed to be appropriate policy in the short run to mitigate the immediate loss of the imports. Notice what the candidate is trying to do. Evaluate the context, right? And try to arrive at a judgment. So to me, this is an attempt at good evaluation. But this is good because this means your inherent skill is there, right? Maybe someone guided you before, and so now just be a bit more aware. We need that 3 bullet points somewhere. And if you are thinking, sir, how can I improve my evaluation further? I would have highlighted to you. Notice all the things that you mentioned over here. You did not identify any assumptions. What makes you think that the government is able to make the best decision? Is there any constraint that we are not talking about in the assumptions when we are discussing the policies? Does that sounds familiar? Right? So if you can challenge the assumption, you recognize the unstated assumption in the discussion, and you evaluate their relevance, again, I'll be giving you a higher evaluation score. So to me, huhwonyoung is just a bit more, right? Just a bit more, okay, for you to scale up. Now I move into the essay. Now for essay component, I think I'm able to show the question over here. So it's just about demand and supply factor causing widening income inequality. You must show that the bridge between one market and the other market is widening, right? I like the fact that the person circled the word widening. This means you are trying to show that it has widened, the wedge has become wider. One of it goes up, the other one goes down. So you can talk about that. And for question B, so we're supposed to discuss which one is a bit more appropriate, right, to reduce income inequality. So in the answer over here itself, again, I would remind you, if you really want to score higher for your level marking, you may want to set that wages is determined by the interaction of demand and supply, and you give the definition of demand and supply. All right, before we move on to the discussion of the rest. And then, but the rest was very good. You have change in demand factor, supply factor. Your diagram was fantastic. But I think I do not know whether has anyone mentioned this to you before. When it comes to syllabus document, if you want to evaluate a 10-mark question, sorry, not evaluate, if you want to score higher for a 10-mark question, you need to talk about outcomes being affected by PD, PS, YED, or cross elasticity. There's a need to mention elasticity concept. Failure to do so itself means that you did not achieve R2 well. Right? So in that case, you'll be marked down a little bit. Okay, so a reminder on that. But I was looking at the rest of the points itself, I think generally your demand and supply is quite okay. But for the second B, again, let me just walk you through very quickly. So at least I'm not going to focus on the minor issues. I'll be focusing on the major issues or how to you improve at least 2 to 3 marks for this particular essay. Again, for your discussion of the points itself, it was done relatively well. I don't doubt your discussion of the various points. Um, but your evaluation, let me bring you further for your evaluation. First, you talk about Singapore's context. You are evaluating critically the contemporary issue over here. And then you talk about the context further. Finally, you move into a judgment. Ultimately, this is the outcome that I want to have, etc., etc. And you talk about the feasibility. So far, so good. But notice your discussion, you miss out the main assumption in all demand and supply analysis. What about ceteris paribus assumption? I could be using all these policies, but do you think there'll be a change due to things like COVID, or can it be any situation whereby it can cause, like for example, other countries are relaxing on their foreign policies. So in fact, immigrants find it much better for them to go overseas instead. For example, maids are not coming to Singapore, failing from Philippines. They would prefer to go to Hong Kong or go to other countries which is paying them more. These are ceteris paribus assumptions, which you have to recognize and then evaluate its relevance. So currently, your evaluation, you are able to critically examine contemporary issue. That is fantastic. Kudos to that. You are able to synthesize an argument. That is also good. Just be reminded. I need to see the assumptions being challenged. Okay. Moving on to the second question. For the second question itself that you have chosen, I think it's question three, yes. But the question three is talk about why is it considered a public good, and then why the government intervenes in the tourism market in Venice. So I need to see the explanation why is it a public good. I also need to see the explanation of maybe other form of market failure. And then we talk about how the Italian government can intervene to overcome both sources of market failure. So to begin with, part A itself, I think generally still okay. But I think your teacher mentioned this over here. MC equals to zero. When I was looking at our answer, I also didn't see this. MC equals to zero. So that means the implication of your non-excludable is done well, but the implication of your non-reverse is not done well. Also, do take note of that. So for example, I need to see things like non-reverence, one person consuming the good does not diminish a unit for the next person. And so therefore there's no marginal cost in producing an additional unit. Marginal cost equals to zero. For allocative efficiency to be achieved, price must be equal to marginal cost. Since price is equal to zero, no one wants to produce the good. Things like that, right? So this is the implication of um, why of non-reverence. So if I don't see the implication, I'll be a bit disturbed. Right? The analysis is somewhat lacking over there. But for your market failure, when it comes to externality itself, I think generally still okay. We talk about divergence. Some of the analysis was still okay. But a reminder for your diagram, because I think I was trying to look at your diagram, right? You miss out a very important analysis. This was what you wrote, right? But I remind you, can you in future change it to with MSC higher than MPC since a better type because my handwriting is so ugly. Since MSC is equal to MPC plus MEC. Right, I need to see this MSC higher than MPC. Right? Social cost is higher than private cost, since MSC now consists of the external cost. And you wonder, why do I want to have you to say in that particular manner? Again, I bring everyone to the syllabus document. Right, it was mentioned over here, over here. So some of you, when you want to explain, you explain it nicely, but you thought it's very nice, but syllabus document is suggesting otherwise. So I recommend everyone to really, really look at your syllabus document if you have the time, right? And if you're looking at this particular review, do take a look at the syllabus document, okay? It's highly, highly recommended. Okay, so if you can have some of all these elements itself, then of course I'll be able to give you a higher score. Your missing mark was because the question was asking you why government intervenes, right? So you have to talk about government intervenes to ensure social welfare is maximized. So you can give a very short idea on why she wants to intervene. Because current output level, there's a day rate loss. And so therefore by intervening, I'm trying to reduce the day rate loss and go back to QS, which is the socially optimal level, which is efficiency. Okay, so if you think that I'm talking, if like you don't really understand what I'm talking about because you must say that current level, the free market is unable to allocate resources efficiently. There's market failure, so government is trying to intervene to achieve efficiency over here. right? Given that her outcome is on efficiency. So that's the missing part. So if the rest, to me, the analysis is still okay. Just this one, a bit of the missing part here and there. For 3B, I remind you, your answer was almost decent, right? But what was critically missing in your answer that prevents you from scoring a very high score is governments are trying to achieve both efficiency and equity. There are two outcomes uh, that that government wants to achieve, regardless of whether they have one market failure, two market failure, or three market failures. But the outcomes are always the same: efficiency and equity. Right? Government's macro objective is efficiency and equity in any market. So if I see your answer being discussed and you mentioned a lot of the policies here and there and etc. I was just looking at it, but I don't see equity, and I will be like a bit worried. You get my point, right? So again, this is something which you might want to be a bit more mindful. Secondly, all policies must be linked to diagram. Huh? That's why your teacher highlighted it to you over here. I've already mentioned countless times. Diagrammatic analysis. I credited you when you drew a good diagram. I also highlight to you that if you don't draw it well, it's like you will be penalized. So therefore, now you didn't even have it mention the diagram over here. So now I'm just reminding you. Okay, so I understand sometimes when we write, we can be quite overwhelmed by the anxiety. I understand that. In fact, all my students are facing that. And when I was still teaching, every year when there's A levels, I will go to the back of the hall. I will do the paper along with all my students at the back of the hall, of course, right? Doing alone as a teacher. But even when I'm hard pressed for time, I always remind myself that I have to draw a diagram. So if any questioned essay, for example, I don't see a diagram, I get very disturbed, like A or B. Okay, so a reminder to everyone. Okay. Of course, some say that can I just write the whole essay without drawing a diagram? The answer is it is possible. Just be able to write very fast.